They towed my tenant's truck right out of a parking space I owned. And that's the day I decided I wasn't going to fight them the normal way. I was going to end it in a way they'd never see coming. Now, I didn't wake up that morning thinking I'd eventually buy a towing company. Hell, I didn't even like dealing with parking issues in the first place. I'm a pretty low-drama guy. I own a small commercial building in downtown Franklin, Tennessee. Nothing flashy, just a clean brick property with a handful of long-term tenants. Mostly small businesses, a CPA, a therapist, one insurance office, people who pay on time and don't cause trouble. But the real value of that place wasn't even the building. It was the lot behind it. 12 parking spaces, all clearly marked, all deeded to my property. And if you've ever dealt with downtown real estate, you know parking is basically gold. Those 12 spaces had kept my tenants happy for almost a decade. No fights, no confusion, no drama. Until the new neighbors showed up. They rolled in fast, cash deal, closed in under 2 weeks, and suddenly the quiet office building next door turned into a construction zone. Dumpsters, contractors, noise starting at 7 a.m. sharp, the whole thing. Their names were Derek and Lila Chun, and they were building some kind of startup hub. Tech people, venture-backed, the kind of operation that moves quick and assumes everything around them will just adjust. The first time I met Derek, he came over while I was checking on some landscaping work. Big smile, firm handshake, confident in that polished, almost rehearsed kind of way. He said, "Hey man, we're gonna be neighbors." Figured I'd introduce myself. And I liked him at first. I really did. He had that energy, like he'd already won something. I walked him around the side of the building, showed him where our properties met, and I pointed straight at the parking lot. I remember saying it clearly, because I always do. These 12 spots back here, they're assigned to my tenants. Been that way for years. He nodded right away, like it wasn't even a question. Got it. Totally makes sense. That should have been the end of it. But about 3 weeks later, I got a call from one of my tenants, Melissa. She ran a small accounting firm out of Suite 3. And I've never heard her sound like that before. She was shaking, angry, confused all at once. "Mark, my car is gone." I thought maybe she was joking, or maybe she parked somewhere else and forgot. But no, she wasn't that kind of person. She said she parked in her assigned spot that morning, same as always, went to lunch, came back, and there was nothing there except a bright orange sticker stuck to the asphalt. For $100. That's what it said. For $100 to get her car back. And right there, something in me just dropped, because I knew immediately this wasn't random. I called the number on the sticker. A guy picked up, introduced himself as Kevin from Titan Recovery Services. I asked him straight up, why was that vehicle towed? And he didn't hesitate. Property owner request. I said, I am the property owner. There was a pause, just a second, but enough to feel it. Then he said, well, sir, we were contacted by the owner of the adjacent property. He provided documentation showing authority over those spaces. That's when it clicked. I didn't even argue with Kevin, because honestly, he sounded like he was just doing his job. Instead, I hung up, took a breath, and called Derek. He picked up on the second ring. Hey, Derek, did you have one of my tenants' cars towed? And I'll never forget how casual he sounded. Not defensive, not even apologetic, just casual. Oh yeah, we've got contractors coming in and out, needed the extra space. Lila thought those spots were part of our lot. Honestly, your signage looks kinda old, man. Might want to update that. For a second, I didn't even know what to say. I just stood there, staring at the parking lot like it had suddenly become something else entirely. Those aren't your spots, I said finally, keeping my voice steady. They're deeded to my building. You had no right to tow that vehicle. He let out this little chuckle, not loud, just enough to get under your skin. Well, if there's confusion, we can sort it out. But from what we've seen, the boundary line might not be where you think it is. That's when the tone shifted. Because now it wasn't a mistake anymore, now it was a move. You're going to cover the towing fee, I told him. And this doesn't happen again. There was a pause on his end this time, longer than before. Then he said, you might want to talk to your attorney before making demands like that. And just like that, the call ended. I stood there for a while after that, longer than I'd like to admit. Because here's the thing, I'm not new to business, but I don't go looking for fights either. And something about the way he said it, it wasn't uncertainty, it was confidence. The kind of confidence that comes from thinking you've already won. That night, I pulled out every document I had on that property. Deed, site plan, old surveys, everything. I spread them out across my kitchen table like I was trying to piece together a puzzle I already knew the answer to, just hoping I wasn't missing something. But deep down, I knew I wasn't. The next morning, I called my attorney. His name's Walter Briggs. Been handling property disputes longer than I've owned that building. He's not flashy, not the kind of guy who talks big, but when he says something, it usually sticks. I dropped the documents off at his office around noon. He told me he'd take a look and call me later. That call came at 4:17 p.m., and the first thing he said was, "Mark, they're wrong. Not, maybe, not it depends, just wrong." He explained it clean, like he always does. The original plat map, the recorded boundaries, everything lined up. Those 12 spaces weren't just mine in practice. They were mine on paper, legally, without any ambiguity. "So what happens now?" I asked. He didn't hesitate. "Now we make them stop." And at that point, I thought that meant letters, maybe a lawsuit, maybe a couple months of back and forth, the usual slow grind. I had no idea this thing was about to get a whole lot messier and a whole lot more personal. Walter didn't waste time. He drafted a formal demand letter that same evening, clean and direct, no fluff. Basically saying you towed a vehicle from property you do not own, reimburse the cost immediately, and cease all unauthorized use of those spaces, or we escalate. It went out certified mail the next morning. Now, if you've never dealt with this kind of situation, there's this quiet window right after you send something like that, where you're waiting to see what kind of people you're actually dealing with. Reasonable ones back off. Careless ones double down. Derek doubled down. We got a response 3 days later from his attorney. Polished letterhead, expensive firm, the whole thing. And the tone, it wasn't aggressive, it was worse, it was dismissive. They claimed there was boundary ambiguity, said their client acted in good faith, and then, like they were doing me a favor, offered to split the towing cost. Split it. I remember reading that line twice, just to make sure I wasn't misunderstanding it. Split the cost of towing a car from my own property. I called Walter. "Tell me we're not entertaining that." He didn't even pause. "We're not." And just like that, we filed suit, conversion, trespass, unlawful towing, everything that applied. On paper, it was a strong case. Clear boundary lines, documented ownership, witness statements from my tenants. It should have been straightforward. But here's the thing about the legal system. Even when you're right, it doesn't move fast. Weeks turned into months, filings, responses, scheduling delays. And while all that was crawling forward, Derek didn't stop. That's the part that really got under my skin. Because now it wasn't about confusion anymore. He knew exactly where the line was. He just didn't care. The contractors kept parking in my spaces like they owned them. And every time one of my tenants tried to use their assigned spot, it was the same pattern. Within hours, their car would be gone. Titan Recovery would show up like clockwork, tow it out, leave another one of those orange stickers behind like a calling card. For more vehicles gone. And every time, my phone would ring. At first it was confusion, then frustration, then anger. Not just at Derek, but at me. Because to them, I was the landlord. I was supposed to protect their space, their business, their routine. And instead, they were getting hit with $400, sometimes $500 fees just to get their own cars back. So I paid it. Every single time. I couldn't let them carry that cost. It wasn't their fight. But I'll tell you this, writing those checks over and over, knowing exactly who was behind it, that does something to you. It shifts the way you think. One afternoon, Melissa came into my office, the same tenant whose car got towed first. She didn't sit down right away, just stood there, arms crossed, trying to stay calm. "Mark, I can't keep explaining this to my clients. They come in, there's no parking, or worse, their car gets towed. It's hurting my business." And she was right. That hit harder than the money. Because this wasn't just about lines on a map anymore. It was affecting real people, their work, their reputation. That night, I called Derek again. I don't even know why. Maybe part of me still thought there was a version of this where we could just talk it out like adults. He picked up, same calm tone as before. "You need to stop," I said, "no build-up this time. This is past a misunderstanding. You're knowingly using property that isn't yours." He sighed, like I was the one being difficult. "Mark, we've got a business to run. Construction doesn't wait for legal paperwork. If your tenants are having issues, maybe they can park on the street for a bit." I actually laughed, not because it was funny, but because of how absurd it sounded. You're telling my tenants to give up the parking they pay for because it's convenient for you? Another pause, then he said it. Take it to the judge. Just like that. Flat, confident, final. And something in me clicked. Because up until that moment, I was playing by the expected rules. File the paperwork, wait your turn, hope the system catches up before the damage gets too big. But Derek wasn't waiting. He was leveraging speed, pressure, inconvenience. He was winning in the short term because he understood something simple. If you make something painful enough, long enough, people start giving up ground just to make it stop. I hung up the phone and just sat there for a while. No TV, no music, just quiet. And that's when I started thinking differently. Not about the lawsuit. That would play out however it played out. I started thinking about leverage. About what was actually driving this situation. And the answer wasn't Derek. It was the towing company. They were the mechanism. The tool. Without them, Derek's plan didn't work. He could park wherever he wanted, but he couldn't enforce it. He couldn't make my tenants disappear from those spaces. Titan recovery, they were the pressure point. The next morning, I called the number again. Kevin picked up. Hey, it's Mark, from the Franklin property. Listen, I don't want to argue about past tows. I just want to understand something. How's business? There was a little hesitation, like he wasn't sure where I was going with that. It's all right, he said. Fuel's been rough. Insurance too. Some months are better than others. I could hear it in his voice, not struggling exactly, but not thriving either. I said, you the owner? Yeah. Ever thought about selling? There was a pause, longer this time. Then he laughed. Selling? Man, everybody thinks towing companies print money. They don't see the bills. I'm serious, I said. If you were to sell, what would that look like? The tone shifted right there. You could hear it. Curiosity replacing skepticism. We didn't make a deal on that call. Not even close. But we talked. And then we talked again the next day. And then we met in person 2 days later at a diner just off the highway. Kevin was exactly what you'd expect. Mid-40s, tired eyes, hands that looked like they'd done real work. Not a bad guy. Just running a business in a tough industry. He laid it all out for me. 2 trucks, a couple of drivers, a handful of contracts with property owners, thin margins, constant headaches. What are you really after here? He asked me at one point, leaning back in the booth. And I could have lied, said it was an investment, diversification, something clean and simple. But I didn't. I said, I'm tired of watching my tenants get pushed around. And right now, your company is how it's happening. He studied me for a second, not offended, just thinking. Business is business, he said finally. Exactly, I replied. We sat there in silence for a few seconds after that. Then I asked him the number. Not what he hoped for, not what he'd brag about, the real number. The one that would actually make him walk away. He gave me a figure, $85,000. Trucks, contracts, everything. And here's the part that probably sounds crazy. I didn't negotiate. Because in that moment, it wasn't about getting a deal. It was about solving a problem. I stuck out my hand and said, let's do it. 2 weeks later, the paperwork was signed. And just like that, I owned the very company that had been towing my tenants' cars. Now, I didn't feel victorious, not yet. Because ownership is one thing. What you do with it, that's what actually matters. And I already knew exactly what my first 3 moves were going to be. The day the deal closed, it didn't feel dramatic. No big moment. No music. Just a quiet signature on a stack of papers in a small office that smelled like coffee and printer ink. And when it was done, Kevin slid the keys across the desk, gave me a nod, and said, she's all yours. And just like that, everything shifted. I drove straight back to my property, didn't even stop anywhere, just pulled into the lot and sat there for a minute, looking at those 12 spaces like I was seeing them for the first time. Not as something I had to defend anymore, but something I finally had control over again. First thing I did was call every single tenant. One by one. I told them, any towing fees you've paid over the past few weeks, I'm refunding all of it. There was silence on the other end at first, confusion, then relief. Melissa actually laughed, like she didn't quite believe it. Wait, seriously? Seriously, I said. That part's over. And I meant it. Not just the money, the whole situation. Second thing I did. I terminated Derek's contract. Clean, immediate, no gray area. I had my attorney draft the notice, send it over as the new owner of Titan Recovery. Effective immediately, services discontinued. No more calls honored. No more tows authorized under his name. Nothing. I didn't add any commentary, didn't take a shot, Just a simple, professional termination. Because at that point, I didn't need to argue anymore. The third thing, that one was a little more visible. I replaced every single parking sign. Same layout, same wording, same bold lettering that said tenant parking only. But at the bottom, where the towing authorization used to list Titan's number, now it still listed Titan's number. Only this time, Titan was me. And there's something quietly powerful about that. Not changing the rules, just changing who enforces them. 3 days later, my phone rang. I already knew who it was before I picked up. Mark, did you actually buy the towing company? Derek's voice didn't sound casual anymore. It was tight, controlled, but just barely. Yeah, I said. Business decision. There was a short laugh on his end, but it wasn't real. That's insane. Is it? I replied. Seems pretty straightforward to me. He didn't respond right away. I could almost hear him recalibrating, trying to figure out what leverage he still had left. You can't just do that, he said finally. I already did. Another pause, longer this time. This isn't how things are supposed to work, he added. And that's when I leaned back in my chair, looking out at the lot, watching one of my tenants pull into their spot without hesitation for the first time in weeks. No, I said calmly. It's exactly how they work. He hung up after that. No goodbye, no last word, just silence. Over the next couple of weeks, things got quiet. No more contractors in my spaces. No more tow trucks showing up like clockwork. No more angry phone calls from tenants. Just normal. The kind of normal you don't even notice until it's been taken away from you and then given back. Derek did try a couple of things, filed a complaint with some local business ethics board, claimed I was abusing my position, creating unfair conditions, but nothing stuck. Because at the end of the day, I wasn't doing anything illegal. I wasn't even bending the rules. I was just finally enforcing them. About 2 months later, the court date came around. By then, the urgency was gone for me. The damage had already stopped. But I still showed up, not for revenge, not even for the money, but for closure. The courtroom was smaller than you'd expect, quiet, almost underwhelming. Derek was there with his attorney, still sharp, still composed. But there was something different about him now, less certainty, maybe. Walter handled most of it. Laid out the facts clean, methodical, no theatrics. Deeds, surveys, timelines, towing records, everything lined up exactly the way we said it would. Derek's side tried to argue ambiguity again, tried to suggest confusion, overlapping claims, gray areas, but it didn't land the same way it had in those early letters. Not anymore, because now there was a pattern. Not a mistake, a choice. Repeated, documented, undeniable. When the judge finally spoke, the room felt even quieter than before. He didn't drag it out, just went through the findings, point by point, and then said it plainly. The 12 parking spaces belong to my property. No ambiguity, no shared claim, no confusion. And then came the part that actually made Derek shift in his seat. He was liable for all of it. The towing fees, the legal costs, my attorney's fees. Over $12,000 in total. It wasn't a massive number, not in the grand scheme of things, but that wasn't the point. The point was he lost. Completely. After the hearing, we crossed paths briefly in the hallway. He didn't say much, just looked at me for a second, like he was trying to decide whether to be angry, defensive, or something else entirely. You went pretty far over a parking lot, he said finally. I shrugged. So did you. And that was it. No big showdown. No final speech, just two people standing there, both understanding exactly how it played out. Now, here's the part one still think about sometimes. Because yeah, I got my spaces back. My tenants were taken care of. The court ruled in my favor. On paper, it's a clean win. But if I'm being honest, it wasn't really about the parking. Not anymore. It was about what happens when someone decides the rules don't apply to them, and how far you're willing to go to remind them that they do. I didn't set out to buy a towing company. I didn't plan some grand strategy from the start. I just reached a point where doing things the right way wasn't enough to stop someone who was moving faster than the system meant to control them. So I adapted. And maybe that's the part people argue about. Because I've had friends tell me I went too far, that I escalated it, that I turned a legal dispute into something personal. And maybe they're not wrong. But I'll tell you this, if I hadn't stepped in the way I did, my tenants would have kept paying the price while someone else played games with something they didn't know. So yeah, I bought the towing company. Not because I wanted to, but because at that moment, it was the only move that actually changed the outcome. And I'm curious what you think. Was that crossing a line? Or just leveling the field? Drop your take in the comments, because I've heard both sides, and honestly, I still go back and forth on it myself sometimes.